Apparently, the more of the plan of what Israel was trying to accomplish in the Iran strike has leaked. They were trying to put this guy Ahmadinejad was being lined up by the United States and Israel in Iran, similar to Rodriguez after Maduro in Venezuela. So they wanted to do a Venezuela. They wanted to do a Venezuela in Iran, but it all fell apart.
Well, a couple of big Iran stories hit Washington yesterday. Let's start with the bombshell New York Times piece yesterday that sort of smacked Washington, D.C. upside the head, claiming that Israel and the United States had planned to install Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Remember him? That's a blast from the past.
The guy they said did not win election because it was an illegitimate election. Now we like him.
Now we like him.
They call him a Holocaust denier. But Israel all of a sudden loves him.
Anti-Israel guy. We're going to install Ahmadinejad to rule Iran. Why would they do that? Why exactly would they do that? Is it to keep this like perpetual war going? Wait a minute. Ahmadinejad, he's now the head of that country. Use that as like some sort of a false flag. I don't know. We'll unpack that in a second. Then a second story, the phone call, President Trump under pressure from Middle East partners to get a peace agreement in place, on the phone with Benjamin Netanyahu for about an hour yesterday. And according to the readout, and three individuals who were in the room said that Netanyahu's hair was on fire, what's left of it.
Yeah, that was a story from yesterday. I didn't cover it because it's hearsay. Yes, I'd expect there to be some type of fallout between Trump and Netanyahu over this Iran war, but privately, like this. Publicly, no, because publicly, Trump has to pretend he won the war. And when you're pretending to win a war, how can you be mad at Israel for a war that he won? If it's going so well in Iran, you can't go to tell the U.S. people, we won bigly, it was perfect, we accomplished everything, and I'm absolutely furious at Netanyahu for getting us into this war. That doesn't make sense. So as long as he's pretending to have won the war, he can't publicly get mad at Netanyahu. And so you only have the stories like this about him yelling behind the scenes, because in public, he has to pretend he loves Netanyahu for getting him into this wonderful war that we are winning so hard.
After this tense phone call where basically he says, no, you're allowing them too much time. We need to bomb them right now. We need to keep bombing Iran. And President Trump saying, under pressure from Middle East allies, we're not going to do that. We want a peace agreement. And then President Trump was asked about this, and he says, Netanyahu will do whatever I want him to do. Listen.
What did you say to Prime Minister Netanyahu about Iran and how long to hold off on strikes?
Fine, he'll do whatever I want him to do. He's very, very good man. He'll do whatever I want him to do, and he's a great guy. To me, he's a great guy.
Yeah, he's a great guy. And so he'll do whatever I want him to do. Do you believe that? Trump telling Bibi what to do. We'll talk about that, the Massey election, this possible peace plan, which seems to be coming together. At least that's being purported, but I'm not sure we believe it. And
I'm calling bullshit on that Trump thing too. But honestly, I don't believe Trump is a complete puppet of Israel. I believe he was tricked by Israel, and now he's stuck with Israel because he was tricked. Because, like I said, he needs to pretend he's won the war. And so he can't get mad at Israel and Netanyahu for getting him into the war, since he's still pretending to have won. And that means Netanyahu is still his ally, who is in the same situation as he's in, which is Netanyahu needs this war to be a victory too, domestically. And so they're both of them stuck in this war together. And maybe behind the scenes they're not liking each other too much, but publicly they have to put on a facade of victory. I think I'm going to switch to a video. This is actually from the Jewish perspective, from someone in Israel. So we'll keep that in mind. But the information in this video is interesting. So let's get into that.
When the New York Times first got an Iranian source saying that Mahmoud Ahmadinejad could be the designated person to be ruler of Iran, I thought that this is just yet another conspiracy theory. Because he's the last person, and I think this is one of the reasons that he was chosen, because he's the last person that you would suspect.
Haven't already, please make sure to through a holiday few right into the table about them a little bit here. Before we get into this jaw-dropping story that you and your colleagues have reported, I just want to set the table a little bit here, because you've been reporting on the Mossad now for 4 decades. You've written books about the Mossad. We did a 4-part series on Inside Call Me Back on Mossad's shadow war with Iran. So I think it takes a lot to surprise you. What was your initial reaction to this story as you started to connect the dots?
I didn't believe it. This is one story, the story that we just published with Fanas Fasihi, Julian Burns, and Mark Mazzetti, my colleagues from the New York Times. This is one component of the overall plan to topple the regime and constitute a new regime instead. This has been going on for years, and the fact that someone tried did not surprise me. But of all the candidates that would have been chosen to be pushed, or that the Mossad would try to crown instead of the current regime, if there's a line, the one they picked would be at, not even in the line, not even in the queue, like out of the room, because he's the last person, and I think this is one of the reasons that he was chosen, according to our sources, because it's the last person that you would suspect. In fact, when the New York Times first got an Iranian source saying that Mahmoud Ahmadinejad could be the designated person to be the ruler of Iran,
So that's who we were trying to install.
I thought that this is just yet another conspiracy theory, that this is not real.
Okay, before we get into Ahmadinejad, because I think his name is not recognizable, it's probably not recognizable to a lot of our listeners, so I do want to come back to him. I just want to establish the terrain. Your reporting draws a clear line between two different war aims. The first was a limited goal of hitting nuclear infrastructure and missile capabilities, and the second, a much more ambitious goal of regime change. Walk us through that shift. When did it happen? Who drove it? How serious was it?
So I think it's easy to draw between the two last operations or round of war between Israel, later Israel and the US against Iran. The one in June that the US joined in the middle, and the one the region is currently in. In June 25, Israel went to strike Iran in order to limit, if not to fully destroy, that was the goal, Iranians' nuclear capabilities, ballistic missiles capabilities, air defenses.
I just want to point out how batshit insane and evil this is. Just imagine just striking another country's military just because you don't want them to be too powerful. Not because they're planning to attack you or anything, but just because you don't want them to have a military. So you just go into their country and just bomb them. That is the way Israel operates. Like Syria, once Assad government fell and there wasn't a coherent military there, Israel, ever since then, has been going in and just bombing the hell out of the country whenever they feel like it. That's what Israel wants. It wants to be able to just bomb everyone around them, and there to not be anyone who can threaten them with any consequences for this.
So, in general, to destroy as much of its military capabilities as possible. This was why, when it was discussed before June 25,
Yeah, sure, I talked with Sargon Avakad, and yeah, I'd be up to talk with anyone. Be very interesting. I've not recently, but I've watched some of his videos, and he has quite the personality.
whether the Supreme Leader, Ali Khamenei, is a legitimate or a suitable target for this operation, it was decided not to kill him. It was even the US that suggested that at the end of this short 12 days war, there will be a need to have a ceasefire agreement with someone. So
Do that. Thanks. Grateful for anything you set up or try.
maybe he should not be killed because he would be the authority to sign a ceasefire. All of this perspective changed towards the next round, so the one that started now we know in February 2026, coming from the assumption that whatever and how successful the Israeli raids and the American attacks on Iran are, at the end, Iran is a massive country with very much developed industries, a lot of technological knowledge and know-how. They will be able to reignite the project. They will be able to rearm, buy more weaponry from China or other places. In short, if you want to solve the Iranian problem, you need to solve the problem from the root, which means a regime change. And this is when, 5 months before the war, this is when Mossad started to put in place the different parts of a plan that they hoped and believe, and still believe by this way, by today, is able to topple the Iranian regime.
Yes. So last year wasn't a regime change operation, but since then they started putting in the pieces in place, and their goal this time around was regime change, and it failed.
Okay, so your piece describes a plan with a long runway. So it appears that it was years in the making. It included, as I mentioned in the introduction, influence operations inside Iran, Kurdish coalition building, outreach to the Kurds, shaping an alternative leadership track. You're in close contact with various players in the Mossad system. So walk us through the outline of the plan.
So the plan called for the first 100 hours to be done and executed by the two militaries, the US and Israeli military, starting with something that was crucial, not enough, but crucial step, which is the decapitation of the leadership, including the assassination of the Supreme Leader, Ali Khamenei.
They did get a lot of the leaders. They got 40 of the leaders. If that wasn't enough, then their plan wasn't very good.
Ali Khamenei was to be taken out by the Israeli military air force together with 40 other individuals. And then 100 hours that will include these targeted killings, destroying as many ballistic missiles as possible to try to make sure that the Israeli and the Gulf states home front is hurt as little as possible. And at the end of that, the Israeli Air Force starts opening a corridor between Iraq and the Iranian Kurdistan. So after 100 hours, 20,000.
Remember, Israel had two bases in Iraq. And so that's probably was part of this effort to do what he's about to say with the Kurds.
Armed Kurdish militias would start rolling from Iraq into Iran with the hope and the planning that when they enter the Iranian Kurdistan, they will have eat more of the locals joining them. And they will start a wave rolling towards Tehran, those who came from Iraq and other minorities that would join them on the way. This is one, let's say, pillar of
I will say that hitting that girls' school on the first day, I think did so much damage to the prospect of regime change in Iran, because anyone who was thinking, oh, the U.S. is coming in and bombing us, it might be a good opportunity to uprise and overthrow the government. You bomb that schoolgirl to kill 150 schoolgirls. You just don't want to side with the forces that are killing the schoolgirls. Oh my God, it puts... it takes the wind out of the sails of anyone who's anti the government and thinking about rising up. It's like, yeah, we can't be siding with the murderers of children.
At the same time, what is called the influence mechanism of Mossad, this is the ability to use different kinds of media, social, TV, radio, in order to mobilize and instigate the protest in Iran. Mossad has been developing different mechanisms of influence for the last 5 years, and they were tested and, according to the Israeli intelligence, proved to be effective in the years and months and days before the beginning of the war. And they should have been put into action to reignite the protest that sort of stopped after the.
So he's basically admitting that the protest, the violence there was an Israeli faction in those protests. That's what he's admitting there.
The civil society in Iran started being butchered by the regime in mid-January. At the same time, Israeli Air Force would start bombing the Basij and the IRGC stations and
the Basij is, for our listeners, the Basij is the domestic security militias operations that is a key instrument of domestic repression within the country.
Exactly. We're talking about the RGC and the Basij are basically the two units, the two organizations that were behind the mass killing of demonstrators in January.
So when we talk about 30,000 plus Iranian slaughter, this was the Basij and the IRGC.
Horrible. The biggest massacre in this.
Again, remember, this is an Israeli source, and they're going to be exaggerating. He's going to be exaggerating the amount of civilians killed. There were civilians killed in the Iranian protest, but not 40,000.
This kind of protest since the establishment of the regime. And they have stations and representation everywhere. They were patrolling the streets. Mossad agents on the ground were supposed to identify the different targets with locations for the Air Force. The Air Force was supposed to come and raid and bomb and kill these oppressors. And at the same time, the air forces of both countries would be able to hit.
I love how it's kill the oppressors, as in the oppressing the Iranian people, when the plan of the Israelis and Americans is to put in their own puppet government. Do you think it's not going to oppress the Iranian people too?
Targets belong to the energy sector, to the supply of electricity to some parts of the country. All in all together, create such a, I would say, shuttering effect of the regime, destabilization of the whole country, that Mossad hoped, Israel hoped, the allies hoped would bring down the regime.
All right, so just to summarize, the plan was, according to your reporting, decapitate the regime, the Iranian regime, open a corridor for the Kurds, activate an influence campaign, and bomb the Basij. So now I want to get to the part of the story based on U.S. sources that, again, is really hard to process. I actually had to read it several times. As I said in the introduction, it read like fiction. The man Israel and the United States had in mind to play some kind of role post-collapse of the regime was Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Again, not just a Holocaust denier, but someone I think who hosted conferences focused on the denial of the Holocaust, a fierce supporter of Iran's nuclear program, someone who spent his presidency calling for Israel's destruction repeatedly.
It's make me think that Mossad and the United, they have no morals. The people they put in charge, it's just as long as they do what we want, it doesn't matter what kind of monsters they are.
I mean, I was working in government and in politics in the U.S., Ronan, for many years while Ahmadinejad was president of Iran, and he was the symbol. I mean, the way we talk now about Khamenei, I mean, he had that kind of presence. There was a huge controversy when he would come to New York for the UN. Since should the U.S. allow him even into the United States? Did the U.S. government even allow him in the United States to address the UN General Assembly because he was accused of war crimes, of incitement of genocide against the Jewish people? I mean, and you're saying that this man that I'm describing here, Ahmadinejad, was deeply involved in this plan that you've laid out. So how did Israel
This guy was now a Mossad asset, most probably.
arrive at this choice of Ahmadinejad? And why did Israel believe he was primed to flip?
So this guy, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, was really, for us in Israel, for you in the US, for many around the world, the face of evil. Now, since he ended his term in 2000.
Remember, we used to work with Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was our guy until he decided to invade Kuwait.
15. He ended his term as president of Iran with a massive clash with the supreme leader. He fired the minister of intelligence. The supreme leader gave him the authority to do that, and they completely separated. They were very, very close, and they completely depart. Since then, Ahmadinejad became like an opposition to the regime from inside the regime, and he positioned himself, first of all, as he was always part of the sort of like the worker class, the low level class. He stayed in his small house, small flat, in not the best neighborhood of Iran. Second, he started to criticize the corruption of the regime. And part of the corruption, if you look back at his speeches, is to say how vulnerable, because of corruption, the regime is to Mossad infiltration.
Isn't it funny? The guy who spoke about the danger of Mossad infiltration is the guy who was planning to work with Mossad to overthrow the government.
So it was Ahmadinejad who said, in a public speech to the Iranian people, that the guy who is in charge of counterintelligence, so the number one guy in Iran that is in charge of catching spies of the Mossad, is the Mossad operative. He positioned himself as a troublemaker to the regime, so the regime did not allow him to run for presidency for 3 times. He was very bitter. They have like a special legislative council that needs to approve the candidates, and they did not allow him. They also put him under some kind of a house arrest. So he had security details, but they were there to protect him, but also to make sure that he doesn't go out of the line. So he was considered to be a loose cannon, and some people around him started to cause some attention. One of them was prosecuted, his chief of staff, and in his trial, they said something about relations with British and Israeli intelligence. And there was some also questionable trips abroad. Few of them to Guatemala, and most, I would say, these that attracted a lot of attention were the ones to Hungary, to Budapest.
And when he was in Hungary, do we know that he met with Viktor Orban or met with officials in the Hungarian security apparatus?
So this whole envelope of when, how, and for what he was recruited, this is still shrouded with difficulty with sources security, lack of reporting. This is not full.
It could be any number of things. It could be blackmail. It could be just he was greedy and wanted power. Well, that probably was a component in any case. And but maybe threats. I don't know.
And I assume that we will soon get the full picture of it. But he went to Hungary, Viktor Orban. He went to teach or to give lectures in a university that is under the influence.
Okay, don't worry. There's no rush. Just do what you can.
So for Orban, it's very hard to assume that Orban didn't know that Ahmadinejad was a very powerful and very present person. He didn't know about that. And if Orban knows, it's very hard to believe that that his 2 allies, Orban's allies, so the US and Israel, wouldn't know. I would say that it's not the number one target for trip for someone like Ahmadinejad to go to Budapest. And now looking in retrospect, it's interesting.
Okay, now, so he's doing these meetings with, Guatemala or, Hungary, maybe other places.
And coming from the last one just a few days before the war, during which Iranian sources are telling my colleague Fanas Fasihi, he observed some of the plans of the war. So he had contacts during these visits with people that are not identified by the Iranian sources, but he had contact with people that showed him some of the plans of some of the thinking, what's ahead with the war. And then I see the question mark on your face.
If I think that this guy, this Ahmadinejad, is going to be investigated, and if the reports are true, if he was seeing plans of the war and he knew the supreme leader was going to be bombed, and he did nothing, and he was, I think he's not long for this world. This guy.
And I understand that because this is a.
It seems preposterous to me. I know Ahmadinejad. I don't know him personally, but he was such a strong presence in my mind, in my analysis and observation of events in the Middle East for so many years. The idea that the Israelis, or through intermediaries, are sitting down with this guy and showing him some of the plans for a war that's about to happen, it's just, like I said, it's fantastical.
When Farnaz, who got the first tip from Iranian sources very close to Ahmadinejad, shortly after the beginning of the war, when she wrote to me, is there a chance that Ahmadinejad is working with the US and Israel? And that come on top of other conspiracy about other important Iranians. I said, yes, he's having coffee near my house in Ramat Sharon. He's just about to come over to visit me. This cannot be, and only much later in the war, much closer to where we are now on the timeline, where American sources started to speak about that. For me, I started to really observe and cross-check the validity of that. Now, at the end of this, it's not enough to topple a regime. You need to have someone to replace. It's not even the regime. Look at what happened in Venezuela. It's not a regime change. It's a leadership change. And I think that what did maybe enchanted President Trump in the plan that was presented to him by Prime Minister Netanyahu, who sat by him in the Situation Room in the White House, and by the Mossad chief, David Barnea, on February 11th of this year, Trump saw a plan that reminded him of Venezuela. So you do not take...
that was intentional. Venezuela went so smoothly. I think Netanyahu correctly assumed that if they presented a plan that was like Venezuela, Trump would jump on it with his ego.
Out the whole regime. You don't take out the whole administration. You don't need to rebuild everything, bitter lessons of the US from the past. You only decapitate the leadership. In Venezuela, you abduct them. In Iran, you kill them. And you put someone that you believe would be, easier to handle, like in Venezuela. And if it worked there, maybe it will work in Iran.
Before we continue, I want to take a moment zone to out, obviously. Ahmadinejad, as I mentioned, he was president through 2000 into 2013, and then he was out, obviously, and he had these clashes with the supreme leader, but he did try to run again, right? He tried to run again in 2017. He tried to run again in 2021. I think he maybe even tried to run again in 2024. And each time his candidacy was, disqualified and shut down by the council, the Supreme Leaders Council that determines who.
Well, given the fact that he was willing to work with Mossad to kill the supreme leader, I think their decision was right.
Who's an eligible candidate, who's not. So the regime knows he's vying for power inside Iran. Would they not have been suspicious that he could be talking to enemies of the regime? It's also surprising to me that he was able to do the kinds of things that he was doing, traveling to these countries, having these kinds of communications.
I don't have all the answers. Your questions are very valid. If he's under house arrest, then how can he be allowed to travel to Budapest? Again, not some Gulfy state that he wants to have a vacation in. So by itself, it's suspicious. I don't have the answer to this. I think that he was considered to be someone that you don't mess with. What is for certain is that he positioned himself as yet a fresh alternative to the old guard of the revolutionary guards, of the supreme leader, not supplying the Iranian people the basic life conditions.
Okay, you say that he was under house arrest in
Sounds good.
Iran, and the plan included an Israeli strike that was designed to free him in the first days of this war. He was injured in that strike on the war's first day. He survived, and then I'm quoting from your piece here, he became disillusioned with the regime change plan. So walk us through what was supposed to happen and what actually happened to him.
So this guy who plotted with them to kill the supreme leader and take over Iran, he was supposed to be freed by an Israeli strike, but he got injured in that strike, so he was out of commission. And then he became disillusioned with the plan when it became obvious it wasn't working.
On February 28th.
So Ahmadinejad lived in this modest flat in the outskirts of Tehran, and they had a small house, small shack, not far away, where his bodyguards were basically protecting him, but also making sure that he doesn't move without their supervision. And on the first day of the second day, the first night of the war, news came from Tehran that among the Iranian VIPs that were killed is also Ahmadinejad, but he was not killed. This facility where the bodyguards were stationed, that was bombed by an Israeli strike. All of them, almost all of them, were killed. And according to American sources, Ahmadinejad was injured, but was able to flee the scene. And
Thing is, that's got to be suspicious for the Iranians that the bodyguards were all killed, but he wasn't. His flat wasn't targeted, only the bodyguards. Yeah. Very suspicious.
was never seen alive again since that night, since that first night, second day of the war. He was injured, and according to some of the sources, that basically set him in a different mood, catching cold feet or changing his mind into his participation in the overall plan. So changing his mind not to be the person to be designated to be crowned to be the next supreme leader. That in any case didn't happen because even that the supreme leader was killed, 2 days later, when President Trump had to authorize the Kurdish invasion, the Kurdish maneuver into Iran, Trump changed his mind. Trump also changed his mind and decided that he doesn't give the order. He got a phone call from foreign leaders. He was under pressure from opponents of the plan inside the White House, and he decided at the end that he doesn't give the okay. So basically, the Mossad plan.
Probably Turkey. Turkey didn't want this at all, and I'm sure other leaders too. So Trump got cold feet halfway through. Although it sounds like it wouldn't have worked anyway because the guy they were planning to replace had gone into hiding.
Was never even launched. This whole massive campaign that we discussed before was not given the okay order to start, and therefore basically collapsed with not materializing into toppling the regime and putting a new guy instead of the old one.
Okay, but Ahmadinejad built his entire political identity, at least in the years that I was following him, on resistance to Israel in the West.
Yeah, it seems like he was never very genuine.
And he suddenly, it seems like, signs up at some point for an Israeli-backed regime change plan. One doesn't do that out of ideology if you are who he is. He signs up because he wants something. Now, I understand he had disagreements and criticisms of the regime based on corruption and other issues, but what was he asking for? Like, what did he want out of this? And were there any guarantees that Israel could offer him?
So first of all, we're not talking about Israel. It's Israel and the U.S. Meaning, U.S. basically signed off on the plan, and the CIA was involved. I assume that as far as we get from the success, possible success, we will get more and more organizations and units and people who said, no, we were not. We objected. This is going to be a growing number, as history usually show. But so
no one wants to be associated with a failure.
This is the two countries. Second. He's a politician. He wants to be the president or the supreme leader. They prevented him. They deprived him of even the chance to run. So this plan gives him the opportunity to be crowned as the supreme leader of Iran, or at least the president of Iran. This is his life dream, to go back there and I'm just assessing, just fantasizing, but to show the old guards, you didn't want me, here I am, doing that in spite of everything you tried to do against me.
And 150 schoolgirls were part of the casualties he was willing to pay.
Still, what guarantees? What was that moment that he decided that he wants in, and then what was the exact reason that he wants out, and what happened to him? I said that he vanished.
If he's not dead already, he's dead for sure now. Or if he's still alive and in hiding, he's going to go even deeper into hiding. Now, all of Iran wants him dead. I mean, he sided with the murderers of children. The U.S. and Israel. He's finished in Iran.
He vanished into thin air. There is nothing except for one message from a spokesperson congratulating Mujtaba Khamenei for being appointed to be the supreme leader. There's nothing. And he's a very, very public person. Very present, as you said. So there's still question to be asked. But again, even if he didn't change his mind, the whole plan collapsed before starting. It did not happen. Not the Kurdish offensive, not the influence campaign, a little bit of Israeli striking the besieged, but not in the magnitude and volume that they planned. All of that didn't happen. So it didn't reach the point where the services of Ahmadinejad were needed. And now, which leads us to this specific day, where we are still in the midst of this conflict, and still with the dilemma what to do now at the hands of President Trump. But I think that these very hours would need to make a call on where to pick up after this plan failed or didn't even start it. He needs to pick up and decide what to do and how to lead the free world in this offensive. Because the place we are in on the timeline.
Remember, this is an Israeli perspective, and he's all for regime change, and he's not okay with the war ending here. But I think we got the gist of what happened and what the plan was and how horribly wrong it went. It's a half-baked plan, in my opinion. They plan to put in this guy, Ahmadinejad, and Google tells me that he's still alive. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's already dead or he's in jail. Anyhow, in other news, for the Iran conflict, Iran has closed its airspace until Monday and is expecting an attack. I don't know myself. Right now there's a pilgrimage going on in Saudi Arabia until the end of May. And so Saudi probably doesn't want the war to restart this weekend. Don't know if they'll be overruled. In any case, it's things are still in the air. The prospect of any type of agreement or peace settlement with Iran right now, I think, is close to zero. The way this ends, I've said it 100 times, is when the rest of the world comes together and pressures Trump to basically give in to Iran. There's no way for the rest of the world to pressure Iran because Iran's the most sanctioned country on earth. And so other countries have no leverage to pressure Iran. And Iran has all the leverage since it controls Strait of Hormuz. But the rest of the world combined can pressure Trump, especially with the midterms approaching. And so that is what's going to happen. But, of course, for the rest of the world to grow the backbone needed to do this, you need a lot more pain. And so I think mid to late summer is when the pain will get so intense that the rest of the world is screaming, and they'll come together and pressure Trump to give in to Iran. And that's when we're going to get a deal and this whole thing will end. But there's no chance of it happening sooner than that. But there is a chance for escalation. That's something we need to keep track of. Anyway, this will be on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Come watch on Kick or Twitch, and I'll see you next video. Bye.